Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome to yet another episode on Little's Law YouTube channel. So, in this video, we are going to see about how to create a GET request, a API GET request or REST GET request using LoadRunner, and we will see with two different examples. So, the first example is going to be a very simple GET request, and then the second example is going to be GET request with strings. And this video is for the one subscriber who has asked how to pass the query string in a LoadRunner GET request. So this video is for him and for everyone who is trying to create a API GET request using LoadRunner. So before we move on to the video, this is me, your Vasant Shanmugam. I welcome you all to Little's Law YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you have not subscribed yet. Like, comment your questions and feedback in the comment section. So with no further ado, let's go to the video. So first, let's see how to create a simple GET request. So that's going to be our first example, how to create a simple request and what do we need for creating a simple GET request and to test it using the LoadRunner. And for this example, we need a URL or a GET request or an API request. So before that, so to create a API request, we need to create a script. So it can be either a web HTTP or HTML. So it can be created like this. So go to the solution, go to add and create new script and choose the web HTTP HTML and then select a script name. And then once you click on create, we'll get a script like this setup with actions with a view user in it and an action and a view user end. So we will have to create the API request inside the actions folder in case if it is a requirement, and in case if there are some scenarios where we might need to create a request in the view user in it and we used to get the response and send it back to the request in the actions folder. But in this video we're going to see how to create two simple GET request using the LoadRunner. So first let us start the transaction, and this transaction is going to be 01 API simple request underscore start, or let's even keep it as simple, like it's going to be 01 API simple request. And then let us end this transaction. So let me again click on insert and I'm ending the transaction, and let us copy this and paste it here so that we will have the transaction started and enter. Inside this transaction, now we will insert the API. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click insert. I'm going to select insert again after I right click inside between the transactions, and under insert I'm going to choose the REST API, and here I'm going to type the URL, which is going to be HTTPS. So this is again going to be an example JSON placeholder dot type code.com/posts/1. So this will go to this particular URL, the JSON placeholder.typecode.com URL, and it will pick up the first post. So that is the action that we are going to do with this particular GET request. So and we are not passing any other URL parameter, or we are not passing any other header value. In fact, there are like multiple header values which we can add as an option, but here for this particular GET request we are just passing the URL. And let's click the run step. This will in fact help us to understand if there are any errors before we insert the step. So this is a mandatory one, and it is always advisable to do this step before you move on to the next step where you are going to insert this step into the script. So what I did is I went to the build step, I added the URL, and when I click on run step, it automatically take me to the step results, or you can even see the preview, and in the step results it will tell us the result of this particular URL or this API, and this is going to be the exact result which we are going to see in the result once we complete our execution of this script. And here we can see these are the headers that are getting loaded when we run this script, and I'm clicking on insert step. So now here we have got the simple API transaction that has been loaded, and let's execute the script and check how does it work. So for running it, either we can go to the menu option, or we can even click on the button, the play button in the options here. So now let's wait for the result, and we are getting the results now. So we are getting the output and the actions has started. So here we can see it is going through each and every step, and the request has been successful. So here we can see that request has been successful. Let's wait for the test to get completed, and until that we will see the responses. So here let's go to the snapshot and let's click on the script. So in case if you want to see the response of a script, you'll have to click anywhere inside the script and then click on the replay. So this will take us to the response. So here we can see the same response which we saw while we were building this script. So let me just maximize this window in case if you can't see this response. So here, so this is the response which we wanted to see. So now let's see how to parameterize this get request. So in case if you are running a get request, it's not going to be a same set of data which you will be using for testing. So in case if you are running a get request, you might be running multiple n number of data. For example, it can be an account ID, or it can be a PNR number, it can be a any sort of request in the API. So let's see how to do the parameterization for this get request. So to parameterize the data, this parameterization is very easy when comparing to any other performance testing tools like JMeter or NeoLoad. So this in fact is very easy for you to create a parameter here. So it's very simple. So in this particular query, we are going to replace the value 1. So what I'm doing now is I'm just choosing the value, the 1, and then right clicking on it, and then there is this option called this replace with parameter, and I'm clicking create new parameter, and automatically it will create me a new parameter. And here I'm going to write so any name for this parameter. So in case it can be like the post number, and whether it should be a file, or it can be a group name, or it can be an iteration number, or it can be a load generator name. So in case, so for this particular example, we do not need a load generator number, but can be a random number. So for this example, like I can choose the iteration number, and then when I click on OK, so I get a prompt that do you want to replace other occurrences of this string with this parameter? And when I click yes, automatically it checks for any other value which I have parameterized. So in this example, I have replaced the value 1. So it's asking whether I shall I replace the value 1 with the post number. And when I click on next, find next, it shows me this 01 which is not required. So when I click on again, I click on find next, and here under the web rest get request, so here I could see the value post number, and I'm clicking on replace. And after that, let's click on find next, and here again it shows at the end transaction which is not required. So we are good now. So there are no more matches found. So I'm clicking on OK and closing this action. So now in case if I'm running multiple times, so how to run that? So go to runtime settings. Under runtime settings, we will have an option to set up the iteration number. So here we could see the run logic, and under that we can see the number of iterations. So I'm just choosing 5 iterations. I just entered 5 iterations. So now this action, so here you can see these actions will run 5 times. So this should help us to run 5 iterations of the get request. Then let me click on save. Let's go to the parameter and check the value here. So here we can see I have chosen the iteration number, so the sample is going to be 1, and since I have chosen the iteration number, so every iteration will be automatically chosen here and it will be executed. So let's see that example of how does it work. Let me start the replay of this test, and let's watch the responses. So how does it work? Let's wait for a few more seconds for the LoadRunner to compile, because every time when we make a change or before we run the script, automatically LoadRunner does a compilation to check for any syntax errors, and if it is good, automatically we can start to see the results. So here under runtime data, we can see the post numbers, and then when it comes here, so you can see the second data is number 2, that is the post number, and then the next iteration, so the iteration is 3. So since we have used the iteration number as the parameter, so automatically this value is getting loaded each and every time of execution. And this is so far a very good tool when you are running a load test when comparing with any other tool, because this gives a lot of flexibility and a lot of customizations which we can make when we are running a load test, or when we are planning for a stress test or any other performance testing areas. So now let's wait for the test to get complete so that we can watch the results. So every action has been completed and every action is successful with a pass status. So let's now go to the snapshot here and let's watch the results. So here, let me just choose it, and for the iteration 1, the user ID is 1 and the ID is 1. Then when I choose on 2, so here the ID is 2 and the title has changed. And then when I click on third, so automatically the ID is 3, and then I have got a different title. So this is how the parameterization for the API request works. So now let's move on to the second example, and this example is going to be a little more complex. So again, this is one of the requests which we have got from our subscriber asking for how to add the query strings, when I am giving a post request. So let's create a get request with the query strings. So for that, let's create another transaction. So this is going to be a second transaction with API request with query strings. And then let's end this transaction. For that, right click on it, go to insert and end the transaction. Let me copy paste so that we will not miss this. So now we have created a second transaction, which is an API request that comes up with the query string. And let me insert the script. So this is going to be the second API, and now the URL is going to be, so this particular scenario is going to deal with a value that will search for the repositories inside the GitHub for a very particular name. So this in fact we can use if you want to search for a repo name under GitHub repository. So the URL is going to be https://api.github.com, and then it's going to be search repositories. So now when we click on, or when we run this URL, so this will search the entire GitHub community, but we do not want that. So what do we need is, I want to search a set of repositories which are having a query value of LoadRunner. So how are we going to do that? So the query string for this is, so when you add a query string, we can either add it in the URL parameter or we can add directly in the URL. So how to add that? For that, I'm adding a question mark here, and then it's going to be q is equal to LoadRunner. So I'm adding a value which is q is equal to LoadRunner. So automatically when you enter the question mark, it is automatically considered as a URL parameter. And here you can see, so until I use the search, the slash, nothing was added as a URL parameter. But the moment when I changed the slash into a question mark, so in case if we can see, if I again change this slash into a question mark into a slash, this value is not getting prompted here, or it's loaded here. But when I immediately change it to a question mark, automatically the value is loaded as a URL parameter, and any value that I'm adding after this question mark will be a new URL parameter. So again, so for adding that, we do not need another question mark. It is going to be and. So when we click on and, automatically a new parameter will get loaded, and the second value is going to be, I'm going to sort the values with stars, the number of stars which every repo gets, and then the order is going to be ascending or descending. So it's going to be a descending. So every time when I add a new parameter to this URL, I'm going to add a question mark, and after the question mark it's going to be an ampersand symbol or an unsymbol. And then finally I want to display the values 10 per page. So it's going to be, per page is going to be 10. So these are the values which I'm going to pass as part of this HTTP request, or for this GET API request. So I'm just giving a quick recap. So anytime when we enter a URL, anything that follows after, or anything that comes until the slash value, will be the URL. And when we start giving the question mark, this will automatically tell us that any values that's going to be come after this is going to be the URL parameter, and that is the query string again. So let's run this step and see whether it is a valid HTTP request. And here we can see it's a very valid request and everything works fine. And then we can see the header. So these are the headers that I've got loaded here, and let me insert the step. So we have insert the steps here, and then let us run the test. And before that, let's change the runtime settings. Let's keep it as just 1, and let me save this, and we will run this value. So we have started executing the values, the API queries. So the first is with a simple request, and the second one is with a GET request that is followed up with multiple query strings. So let's wait for the results to get completed, and let's see how does it work. So both the request has got passed. So in the previous example, so we have parameterized the number. So what if, in case if you want to parameterize a string? So for that, it's again simple. It's again going back to the actions, choose the value which we want to parameterize, right click on it, go to replace with parameter, and create a new parameter. And this time let's create a new file. So this is going to be repository. So just we are going to search for the repositories, and let me click on OK. So this, the original value here, it shows it's LoadRunner, and when I click on OK, automatically this will tell us that if there are any other occurrence like we see for the first time. So let me click on again yes, and let me search for the value. So there are no any other values found in the script. So let's go to the actions, and under parameters and under the repositories, you can see here automatically this value, the parameter type, which is file, has been created. And under the file we can see the file path. So this is the file path under the folder. So this is the default location where we have our scripts and everything. So this is where it has been automatically stored, and every time it's always advisable to have the files in the table files in the .dat format, so that when we migrate this script to any other locations, these files will not be missed. And these are very compact again. So now in case if I want to add any values, I can just click on edit with notepad, and this will take me to the notepad. And if I want to add some values like neoload or jmeter or github or git, so I can add any values to the list. And when we click on save and close, automatically we can see the values that has got loaded here. In case if I want to start this test from the row number 3, so automatically I can change the first line to 3, and it will be loaded from the number 3. So for now, this example, I'm just keeping it as first, and then I'm clicking close, and let's save this. And now let's go back to the runtime settings, and we will run this script for 5 times, and let's see how does it work. So I'm just running these scripts again to see how does it work. So this time again we are running a GET API request using LoadRunner for a simple request for in the transaction 1, and then a little complex API request that is followed up with the query strings, or the parameters, in other words I would say. So also we have seen how to parameterize the GET API requests. So let's wait until the test is completed, and then we will see how does the test has been executed with the values that we have executed during the test, that is with the parameterization values. So now the test is completed, and let's go back to the actions, and under actions let me click on the second transaction, and then let me choose the snapshot, and let me expand this section so that we can see the results in a bigger window. And let me expand it a little more. And here we can see the values for the third iteration, which is the JMeter. And then in case if I am looking for the fourth iteration, so here we can see a different set of values that has got. So here under the response body, so here we can see, so these are the values for the searched keywords, and then let's search for the values for the 5. So this is again, so this is how the GET request works with LoadRunner. So this is how we have to design, or this is how we have to test the GET request, the API GET request with LoadRunner. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and Little Sla.